Welcome back to Passionate Oral Talk Radio. Educate, enlighten, entertain. Also, cool your heels with Lillian, heard every Tuesday evening from 8 to 9 p.m. on AMFM247.com. And this afternoon on Cool Your Heels, our special guest is Brett Macreol from the Jason Corporation, who is going to tell us how to handle stress during the holidays, or I guess any time is a good time. So good afternoon, Brett. How are you today?
Good. I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me.
Well, I think it's really important for people to learn how to handle stress because it's just not a physical thing now. It can take you over mentally as well as physically.
Absolutely. It's no secret that, especially during the holiday season, it can be a very stressful time, and that can really take a toll on anyone mentally.
And I think, too, that if you don't know how to really handle it, it will start handling you. So how did the Jason Corporation get involved with stress, or is it something that you handle all the time? And what are some of the things that you would consider telling people how to incorporate into their daily routine?
Okay. So the Jason Foundation is dedicated to the awareness and prevention of youth suicide. We do this through educational and awareness programs that equip young people, parents, the community, teachers with tools and resources to help identify young people who may be at risk for suicide and how to assist them in getting help. So anytime where we identify maybe a risk factor or something in a young person's life that may make it more likely that they attempt suicide, we try and do what we can to help them address those issues. Now, on a day-to-day basis, it can be beneficial to stay organized. Again, if we're kind of going back to the holiday season, some of that stress is related to feeling overwhelmed, out of time, being underprepared. So planning ahead can really eliminate or erase some of that pressure. And obviously you can see how that may be beneficial, on a daily basis. Just something to do day to day that can very much improve some of that stress.
So
it's also Go ahead.
No, I was going to ask, how does once a person can admit to themselves that they have stress? I mean, what are some of the stress symptoms that I'm sure kids have, but if alert parents can also detect them in their kids?
I'm sorry. So what are some of
So one of the what's sort of some of the symptoms that maybe teens exhibit before they do bodily harm to themselves?
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So many times a young person who attempts suicide gives clear warning signs. This can be as direct as suicide threats. So it may be something such as I'd be better off dead, or you'd be better off without me, or it can be as direct as I'm going to kill myself. We need to be vigilant, looking out for young people who are depressed. Depression is one of the leading causes of suicide attempts across all ages, not just in young people. Increased anger, irritability, lack of interest in something that they once loved, or out-of-character behavior is really a big one there. So maybe if you have an outgoing youth, all of a sudden they've dwindled their friends down. They're only talking to 1 to 2 people at a time. If you see any kind of recurring themes of death or suicide in writing, that's one of the reasons we always try and reach out to teachers as well. Sometimes the thoughts and feelings manifest in school writing or even through diaries, things like that. Previous suicide attempts is a huge indicative factor of someone who may attempt in the future. And then something that we have seen is making final arrangements. So sometimes this appears within the younger female age group where they want their friends to play a certain song at a funeral, or they want this or that to be done. But there's also risk factors within a young person that elevates the likelihood that they will attempt suicide. The home environment, the community environment, and school environment all play a factor in a young person's life. Now, some of these, having stable and strong relationships in each of those environments, can be a protective factor, but on the reverse side, coming from a very volatile situation may increase the likelihood that a young person attempts suicide. Things like that. The LGBT community are 3 to 5 times more likely to attempt suicide than their heterosexual peers. There's a number of warning signs and a number of risk factors to look out for.
Now, also, are there things that you can maybe examine the kid's body? Because I know that cutting is, or taking a cigarette and burning themselves seems to be on the up and up.
Absolutely. So many times that's like a form of self-mutilation or self-harm. These can be, it's always very important to take anything like this serious. I would recommend, if you see any of this, that it is vitally important to get to a professional. So reach out to someone, whether that's a counselor, a psychologist, psychiatrist. If it's, a dire need, go to the emergency room immediately. Now, there is a difference, though, in that kind of behavior and suicide attempts. Usually what those are non-suicidal self-injury, and what that can be is someone who's in pain, and this actual harming themselves, whether you said it's cutting or burning themselves, releases endorphins in the brain that causes the person to feel better. Unfortunately, each time that a young person does this, it takes more to release. It takes more pain. It takes more cutting to have the same effect. So what ends up happening is it gets worse and worse while they're still trying to get that same feeling of release. But that is absolutely something to watch out for, and something that needs to be addressed within a young person.
And I would suggest to parents, if your kid starts getting involved in the drug scene, and don't be dissuaded just because they legalize marijuana, that it's not a danger for your son or daughter, because it also is. It's called dependency.
Yes, absolutely. Mental or addictive disorders are associated with a high percentage of suicides. Absolutely, the two have been closely related, especially within the last several years. The more and more that the United States looks into, like, the opioid epidemic.
Now, a lot of kids will tell you, well, my mother was depressed, or she was suicidal, or my father was suicidal. It's in the genes.
That is also that is something that happens. A young person who has a familial history of someone who has died by suicide or has attempted suicide is more likely to attempt suicide.
Is there any particular reason why that is?
I don't know for certain. I'm sure there's some information out there that we could locate. I just do know that, having a closeness to someone who has died by suicide and this familial connections do increase the likelihood. Whether that's losing someone who would be a part of that support structure, or just being that close to such a tragic accident, at that point, I don't personally know, and I would hate to, just kind of.
I'm just kind of curious, because I know that my mother was always threatening that, but I certainly never occurred to me to threaten that, because it seems like it's a self-fulfilling prophecy that you would do bodily harm to yourself. And who wants to do that to themselves?
Right. Many times people who attempt suicide are struggling, and they're hurting. And a lot of what we hear is that it's not that the young person wants to die, but they want the pain to stop. And so, really what we need to do is get to these young people before this is their solution, right? It's often been tabbed as a permanent solution to a temporary problem. So what we try and do is help young people realize that this is a temporary problem. Time will heal. Things can get better, and that this isn't the only way to make that pain end.
So what kind of, exercise, or whether it's from the mind or physical or even emotional type exercise, to help them try to deal with this? Is meditation recommended, for example?
I would say yes. I don't personally have any expertise in meditation or seeing, some of those benefits, but, definitely taking care of yourself physically and mentally is important for sure.
Okay, so that if your kid seems a little bit off, send them outside for a run. Or put them on a leash, better yet, and take them out for a run.
Physical exercise can absolutely help. Um, you know, um, Being physically active has been proven to be healthy, beneficial. Like I said, both physically and mentally. So that definitely would be something that could help.
Now, do you ever think it would be something that uh, your foundation would consider sort of? I know that when I went through school, and of course things have changed since then, but we used to get coupled with gym class. We had other classes in which you were spoken about certain dangers that you could actually learn how to work through or find somebody to help you work through it should you have some bad thoughts and concerns to your health to make it part of the school curriculum.
Absolutely. So, like you said, when I was going through school, when we learned about suicide, it was one paragraph in a wellness book that
Yes.
we were told to read by ourselves, and we never brought it up again. Obviously, that approaching the situation in that manner isn't doing enough. So, actually, we do have programs that we offer to the community and to school systems and to teachers and districts. We have a student curriculum that is a 3 to 5 day lesson. We also have various other shorter programs that are available for schools to use. And basically, it's all about looking for a friend who may be struggling. So, I think what is important is that you don't ask young people to self-identify. That it can happen, and it does happen. However, it's easier to teach, middle schoolers or high schoolers to look out. Here's what we need to be on the lookout for our friends. So if a friend is struggling, here's what we need to be aware of. And then we also have in our programs where they can go to for help, whether that's a school counselor, their favorite teacher, a coach, your parents, obviously, is a huge one. The parent-child relationship is so strong. Just about every parent you ask, anything that you need, that child can come to them and talk to them. So that's something we want to reinforce that idea within our programs, that there are people out there that can help, and it's not something you have to fight alone.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea because I'm a 50s kid. And so a lot of these things that are now coming along have been built on, what we didn't know back in the 50s. These kind of things were considered private and considered under the jurisdiction of Dad. And I always kind of felt sorry for Dad because he always seemed to be really responsible for the health and well-being of the whole family. And where did he unload?
Right, right. Yeah, one of those, again, kind of those day-to-day steps that can be helpful is to just get help when you need it. Whether it's an extra set of hands in the kitchen, whether it's cleaning dishes, preparing food, or even, going a step further and getting the therapeutic insights from a professional counselor. It's so important to ask for help when you need it.
And it's really difficult, too. So do you find that girls more than boys suffer, or is it equal across the board?
So, girls attempt suicide at a far higher rate than boys do. However, boys die at a higher rate than girls. The the reason for this is the choice of means. Typically, boys choose more lethal means, such as firearms, whereas girls tend to choose means where we have an opportunity to intervene. So it is hanging, it is drugs, using drugs to overdose. With an overdose, we have an opportunity to get help. We can get them to a hospital. They can get their stomach pumped with these, whereas firearms don't really allow us for that opportunity to get them to professional help. That being said, one of the fastest rising populations that are dying by suicide are 10 to 14-year-old girls, and that's, again, due to choice of means. So they're turning to more lethal means at a higher rate, and that's so very troubling because, like I mentioned, they attempt at a far higher rate than boys. So if they start completing, if that completion percentage meets up with their male counterparts, those numbers are going to rocket in the next 10 to 15 years.
Is it because of social media as well?
So some experts and some newspapers have pointed to social media as a cause, and I think that can kind of be a double-edged sword, if you will. Kids these days are connected 24/7 to everyone else through social media. Let's say I was having trouble with people at school when I was growing up. Well, once I got off the bus, that could be the end of it. If I didn't want to see this person, I just didn't go to that part of the neighborhood, and then I wouldn't have to deal with that. Now it's 24/7. They can be reached in the middle of the night in the safety of their home and still be bullied, cyberbullied. That's obviously a big hot button right now. So that 24/7 connectivity can allow for that bullying or issues to arise at any time. That being said, this day and age of connectivity allows us to have more resources 24/7 as well. So, some of these social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, they all have means to report if you think someone is suicidal, if you're concerned about the mental health or the mental well-being of another person. They're even looking into using artificial intelligence to look at posts to see if someone may be thinking about suicide. So, I can see the good and the bad on both sides. At this point, we're talking about 24/7 crisis lines that you can call at any time and connect with a clinician. We're talking about a text line. Young people are all so much more likely to text somebody than pick up the phone and make a phone call. So these crisis text lines now are having millions of conversations to help young people. Like I said, I can see the pros and cons of it. I don't think that it is as clear and cut as social media is the cause for the uptick in suicide.
I don't think so, because they can still be harassed via cell phone. I mean, in our day, the kids used to pick up the phones and harass you that way.
Yeah.
And I'm sure everybody from the 50s and 60s can tell you that's exactly what happened. I mean, if you really want to make somebody's life miserable, you can do it with a phone.
Right.
So I just think it's pretty much how much is up to the parents to be vigilant without being overly stepping over that line, because I know that I raised a kid by myself, and we had this understanding. If it got to the point where he couldn't take it, that's when he brought me in. And there were a few times that I had to get on the phone and tell the would-be person a few facts of life that apparently Daddy must have missed. And I found it was mostly boys were nastier than the girls. Is it because they really have fewer chances of really being nastier emotionally than a girl can?
So as far as, what a person can do, I don't know as far as, the difference between the sexes there.
Right.
But absolutely there is action items that a parent can do. That being said, it as the saying goes, it takes a village. We need to institute programs and provide information, provide tools to everyone around a young person, their friends, their coaches, their teachers. But the parents can do certain things. One thing that's vitally important is to remain calm. If a young person, if your child comes to you and needs to talk, it's so very important to, not be overwhelmed. You want to try and stay relaxed and create that comfortable atmosphere so that young person who, in the event they are suicidal, is able to open up to you. They want to reach out for help, and you become, that safety net for them. It is important to be prepared to talk about suicide. So, if you have never received any information about suicide prevention before, and your son or daughter comes up to you and says that they are suicidal, how do you start that conversation? you need to be prepared to act. So once they open up to you, you're not afraid to take action. You don't know what to do. You don't know where to go for help. So having this information ahead of time before it's needed can really make the situation a lot more open and make you seem available, and you will be available for that. But again, a lot of that has to do with being prepared to react and know what to do if they come to you. It's always important not to be the hero. This isn't something that you should try and handle alone. 99% of the time, if not even more, you need professional help. This is something that you shouldn't try and fix or handle by yourself.
Now, I understand there's a new suicide bill going to be signed into law soon nationally. How will that help you?
I believe you're referring to the new number that's related to the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. Currently, the number for that line is a 1-800 number. And, in times of need, it can be hard to remember, 1-800-273-8255. Having a number similar to 911, in the case of an emergency in a time of crisis, everyone knows that you can call 911.
Yes.
So the hope is that this number becomes, that for mental emergencies. If you are absolutely having a hard time and you don't know where to turn, you can remember 988.
And I think it's a great idea because, like I tell a lot of people, when you're having the crisis, it's not your time to start looking up information.
Exactly.
I
agree.
So how young do you think you should start talking to kids or instituting it in the schools for kids to start understanding?
That one is kind of up to debate. Currently, our programs are set starting at 7th grade.
Okay.
Again, at that point, it is all about looking out and being there for a friend. One of our programs is called the Be One Project. The theme is someone you know may need a friend, be one. And so it's very upbeat, has a very positive message, and so that's the kind of programs that we suggest for that age group, your 7th and 8th grade. By the time they enter high school, we suggest a more intense curriculum, more encompassing, if you will, to give them even more information, maybe allow a little more direct conversation about that. But as a whole, as a community, as a society, we need to be aimed at even younger than that. As a parent, you need to be looking out for ages before that. 10 to 14-year-olds, again, are one of the fastest growing populations as far as the number of suicides. In the last 10 years of data that we have, the number of suicides for 10 to 14-year-olds has doubled.
That's incredible. How are you doing with college students? I know that my dad told me when he went to Cornell they had a leaping rock where a lot of the students leapt from up there and crashed themselves down on the stones below.
Absolutely. So unfortunately, suicide rates for all ages have really been rising for the last 40 years, and that is also present in our college age group. Currently, suicide is the second leading cause of death for college-age youth in the United States. It's only surpassed by a grouping of accidents. It's the only grouping in the top 10 leading causes of death. But suicide over the last, I believe it's been about 10 years now, has passed homicides in that age group for the second leading cause of death there.
That's terrible. Do you find that suicides are high in some of the, religious communities that keep themselves separate from the rest of the common communities, like the Amish and the Mennonites, or the people out in Utah?
I don't have any specific statistical information for those populations. Now, I do know that our Native American populations have a higher suicide rate per 100,000 than the overall public, but unfortunately I don't know specifically about those communities that you're
I
talking
was just curious because I live in Pennsylvania and there are large groupings of Amish and Mennonite communities around here. So I was just wondering if anybody had ever investigated to see what was going on because they're really close communities to the rest of the world.
Right. And again, I don't really have that information. I do know that a lot of our Midwestern states have a higher suicide rate than the East Coast, the West Coast, if you will. You know, the suicide rate in Montana and South Dakota, North Dakota are higher than what we see in New York and California. You know, your more rural populations have a higher suicide rate per 100,000 than the urban cities.
Well, the cold winters would certainly be depressing.
That I think it definitely has to do with the lack of resources, especially.
Yes. It's if you needed to go to the hospital, there's something like 5 or 6 hours away. When I was living up in Maine, the communities were very small and very isolated because of the winter weather. And it always surprised me how many kids sought refuge that way.
Yes, absolutely.
So, Brett, please tell everybody where they can find you and the Jason Corporation, all the information necessary for one to get in touch with your organization.
Absolutely. So you can find us online at jasonfoundation.com. If you go to that website, we have our contact information there. If you ever need to give us a phone call, all of our programs and resources are available at no charge, so you can access DVDs, trainings, handouts, and it won't cost you a penny. Again, all of that information is available online at jasonfoundation.com.
Terrific. Well, thank you very much. And before we go away, I want everybody to know that they can hear this all over again on iTunes, iHeart, all the social media, soon to be on Spotify, and also at https://passionateworldtalkradio.com. Look on the right-hand side of the page. You'll find the menu there. Scroll down until you come to Cool Your Heels. Click on it, and it should be posted today. And also heard next Tuesday evening from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern on AMFM247.com. And before you go away and stray, Chamfort had this to say in 1805, to enjoy yourself and make others enjoy themselves without harming yourself or any other. That, to my mind, is the whole of ethics. Thank you all very much for listening. And remember, please keep listening. Thank you.